Test, trace, isolate and support. What you need to know about the Rainbow Unicorn government's COVID-19 plan. Or in other words, what they really mean is what they want you to think. What they want you to think about their so-called plan. So let's get into this quickly. There's 14 pages or so. It says here, there are no simple solutions to the challenges that lie ahead, and no quick fixes that will allow us to lift restrictions quickly or dramatically. However, we know how important it is to restore as much normality to life as soon as we can. In the weeks and months ahead, we will need to continue to play our part in Scotland's response to the disease. To protect each other, our lives are not going to go back to exactly how they were. To protect each other. Yeah. Subliminally, drip feeding you, or drip feeding fear porn into your ear to make you think the onus is on you. You have to take the initiative. Guilt tripping, essentially, reverse psychology, take your pick. Instead, we want you to continue to adopt our behaviour to reduce the risk of the disease spreading. Yeah. We need to take the initiative. It's incumbent on us to adopt our behaviour because the government left the borders open, allowing for this thing to enter the UK. And even while we've been in lockdown, it's now managed to find itself on the Isle of Skye. If Britain wasn't protected in and of itself by being an island, Skye, you think, would have been protected that little bit more, being an island and all that. But no, it's on Skye now. It's on the Isle of Skye. So I want an explanation as to how it managed to find itself there. Instead, we will need to continue to adopt our behaviour to reduce the risk of... Oh, sorry, I read that. We will need to continue with physical distancing and good hygiene and respiratory hygiene, including the appropriate use of face covering. Yeah, that's right. We're going to have to wander about with face coverings on now. Our behaviour matters, and our choices and willingness to make sacrifices to help keep people in Scotland safe will be crucial. Okay, here's that reverse psychology kicking in, or kicking up a notch even. You know, subliminally making you feel as if it's on you. You need to comply. And even if you don't believe the hype, even if you don't believe 100% of what they're saying, the onus is on you. And even if you don't buy that, other people reading this and other people hearing what they're saying in relation to this will see you as somebody that's not complying. And they will see you as not willing to make sacrifices, etc. Selfish and whatnot. A key aspect of the next phase is the test, trace, isolate, support approach. We will test people in the community. Here's that word again, community. Calling people, we're a community now, it's great. A political community, a distinct political community. The SNP's own words, not mine. We're not a people anymore, we're a community. We will use contact tracing, a well-established public health intervention, to identify the close contacts of those cases who may have had the disease transmitted to them. Who may. A lot of mays come up here, you will come to find. We will ask and support those close contacts to self-isolate, so that if they do develop the disease, so there is less risk that they will pass it on to others. But that in itself is nonsensical, because you keep, or apparently according to what they all say, people have this for several weeks before they start to show symptoms. So by that point they would have spread it to everyone anyway. And most people, when they don't feel well, don't go out anyway. I don't need guidance from the government to tell me to self-isolate if I don't feel great. Anyway, so that if they... and we will make sure that support is available to enable people to isolate effectively. However, it's important to stress that test, trace and isolate will be most effective when levels of infection are low, lower than now, and stay low, and that its success relies on all of us knowing and agreeing what to do if we have symptoms, and being prepared to self-isolate when advised to do so. Yeah, the onus is on us. One of these public health measures is the Taste, Trace, Isolate, Support approach, which is designed to help us interrupt chains of transmission in the community by identifying cases of COVID-19, tracing the people who may have become infected by spending time in close contact, and then supporting those close contacts to self-isolate, so that if they have the disease, they are less likely to transmit it to others. But if they've been in close contact with someone, several weeks have gone by, and by that point, by your logic, by your own fear porn, and by your narrative, they would have already passed it on to others. So it says here, person experiences symptoms. They think they are consistent with COVID-19 and self-isolate. Problem with that is, though, of course, the majority, if not all, the symptoms of COVID-19 are identical, if not near enough identical, to the flu and so on and so forth. And coronavirus covers a lot of things. Bear that in mind. So anyway, So let's just say somebody has a runny nose and a cough or whatever, or has the flu even. Initial assessment undertaken online or by the phone, and a test arranged if appropriate. Okay. Process to identify close contact begins. If test negative, the person no longer needs to self-isolate and contact tracing does not take place. If the test result is positive, but the problem with that again is that a lot of people will test positive because coronavirus covers a lot of things. They say that they have a specific test for COVID-19. I'm not entirely sure the validity of that claim. I'm not going to say either way. Anyway, an overview of the approach is provided in Annex A. It will not be effective on its own though. Instead, it must be used alongside other public health measures to reduce transmission, such as physical distancing, no proof that it works, good hand and respiratory hygiene, and including appropriate use of face coverings and disease surveillance, of course. So it will be important that everyone living in Scotland understands the symptoms to look out for in themselves and in their household, and what to do if they get those symptoms. More than that, test, trace, isolate, support will require all of us to be ready to self-isolate on each occasion someone we have been in close contact with is diagnosed. Early identification and isolation of possible cases, we need everyone to be aware of the symptoms and understand that what they need to do themselves to support our test, trace, isolate, support approach. Early and rapid testing of possible cases. We are working towards ensuring that everyone who needs a test can get one, regardless of whether they can travel to a drive-through test centre, need to be seen by a healthcare professional, or can self-administer a test at home. Early and effective tracing of close contacts. This will involve people providing information about who they have been in close contact with, supported by dedicated staff as required and technology where appropriate. So we need to provide information regarding people we have been in close contact with, regardless of whether or not we have actually got a confirmation that we have this virus, quote unquote, as it confirms right up here. If test result is negative, the person no longer needs to self-isolate and contact tracing does not take place. But it goes on to talk about this process may start before the person has had their test result. So you provide all this information regarding everyone you've been in close contact with, which I can't help but feel is a bit of a covert way of trying to figure out who you talk to, if I'm quite honest. The purpose of contact tracing: a close contact is someone who has been physically close enough to the confirmed case for a long enough period of time that they may have had the infection transmitted to them. For COVID-19, this includes everyone who has been less than 2 meters away from a confirmed case for 15 minutes or more. The risk of the disease being transmitted is higher. The closer the contact, the greater the exposure to respiratory droplets, for example from coughing or farting, believe it or not, or the longer the duration of the contact. You think I'm joking about farting? I'm actually not. They've now come out and said farting spreads COVID-19. Emerging evidence suggests that transmission can occur before a person is symptomatic. This means that it will be important to confirm cases through testing quickly, and we will need to trace the people a person spent time with before they felt unwell, as well as after their symptoms started. Many people have very mild or atypical symptoms or no symptoms at all. This means that it will not be possible to identify every possible case by symptom-based assessments. Reflecting on international evidence, who frowned thin lips? The WHO? Bill Gates? Two organisations I know you're very friendly with as it goes. It's best practices and decisions about the approach in Scotland. Isolation will be challenging. In order to interrupt chains of transmission effectively, we will have to ask close contacts who may not even know the person with COVID-19 to self-isolate for 14 days. The success of this approach will therefore depend on the continued willingness of the population to do this. Yes, it's on us. The onus is on us. Trace and isolate support will be expanded rapidly, learning from our own experience and the experience of others around the world. We will build on the expertise and experience of China, make use of new and existing digital infrastructure and expanding accessible testing programs in order to keep each other safe. We will need to ask and support individuals to self-isolate, a difficult thing to do, and so keeping human rights and equalities consideration at the heart of our approach will be very important. Contact tracing. Digital tools will support our contact tracing work. The Digital Health and Care Institute are developing a secure web-based tool for the NHS in Scotland, accessible on smartphones or computers, which will allow those who are able to input details of people they have been in close contact with, and for these to be sent directly and securely to contact tracing teams. A diagram setting out how this digital tool will support contact tracing is provided in Annex B. However, we also recognise that not everyone in Scotland will want, but the onus is on us, so now it will look as if they don't want to and they're selfish, but however, or be able to use a web-based tool, so we will ensure that telephone support will be available for everyone who needs it. Yes, having a consultation regarding what you may or may not have on a phone call. Great. In addition to the digital platform being developed, NHSX is developing an app which intends to support contact tracing through proximity tracking. This app uses Bluetooth technology to identify close contacts among other app users and may be particularly useful for identifying people who have been in close physical proximity but who are unknown, such as strangers on public transport. This is a UK government-led project which we understand will be trialled soon, and we are seeking to ensure greater involvement from the Scottish Government in its development. Of course you are. Let me in, Boris, please. In particular, we need to understand how data from this app will interface with the Scottish approach to contact tracing. We consider that an app of this type can be an important enhancement to contact tracing, but it is also important not to see it as a substitute for the approach to contact tracing we describe here. Contact tracers are more than simple data gatherers. Through their discussions with cases and contacts, they must conduct careful risk assessments and provide doctor support. Data gatherers. Testing and tracing will only have an impact on reducing transmission in the community if close contacts of confirmed cases self-isolate. Onus is on you again. We know that this isolation is going to be challenging and that some people will require support. We recognise this will include those contacts who do not become unwell and who will need to isolate 14 days to make sure they are not going to get ill and pass the illness on to others. It's possible that people will have to self-isolate more than once, perhaps multiple, if they're identified as a close contact of a case more than once. We will be asking most people who have been in close contact with a confirmed case to remain at home completely during this time, isolating themselves as far as possible from other household members. But by that point, you would have passed it on. We must be willing to continue physical distancing outside our homes. We must continue to observe good hand and respiratory hygiene, prepare for the possibility of having to self-isolate for 14 days, in order to protect others because a close contact, whether someone we know well or someone we have only spent time with once, has been diagnosed with COVID-19. Test, trace, isolate, support along with other public health interventions to reduce the risk of transmission is likely to be part of life in Scotland until a vaccination programme, of course. Reporting symptoms are asked to self-isolate and a test is arranged. Testing enables those who do not have COVID-19 to be released from self-isolation and contact tracing to continue for positive cases. Doesn't start, but it continues. Meaning that if you've already given up all this information, regardless of why you think they want it, what are they going to do with all that information? They don't explain that. All cases are asked to self-identify close contacts. All cases, regardless of whether or not they are positive. All cases. For low-risk cases, all close contacts are provided with advice to self-isolate. For high-risk and complex cases, specialised risk assessments and support to identify close contacts is available. Some cases and close contacts will be able to self-isolate easily. Others will need support to isolate. And how are you going to provide that support? I really want to know. And their last little diagram here. Diagram of the DHI digital tool, which I will try and bump up a little bit if possible for you to see. 2 seconds. Yeah, there you go. So I'll leave that there. On that note, peace.